Hey adventurers, so today is another exciting review day for me because this is going to be a review for The Children of Húrin by J.R.R. Tolkien. This is, I did The Hobbit, all three Lord of the Rings books, and Unfinished Tales this year, and so this is my fifth Tolkien book that I have reviewed this year. And that's exciting. Tolkien's my favorite author for a reason, and it's just exciting for me to be able to continue reviewing his books, and I think I should have two more at least before the end of the year, which is The Silmarillion and Tales from the Perilous Realm. So that's exciting to do. So anyways, The Children of Húrin by J.R.R. Tolkien is an epic fantasy, it's a mythology, it's a tragedy, and just one of the most epic books I've ever read for so many reasons, even with how short it is, which is, with the list of names, it is, turn the page, 313 pages with listed names. So it's a short book, really. So The Children of Húrin by J.R.R. Tolkien is a dark, harrowing tale of a family cursed by the Dark Lord and unable to escape their doom. It is easily the saddest and most depressing story Tolkien has written, but also his most skilled and arguably best. Since I first read this story, I have said that it is my favorite Tolkien story. Not my favorite book, because that takes into account many other factors as well, but my favorite story. And yeah, I'm not going to get into the difference between favorite story and favorite book at this time. Maybe someday I will do a video on that, but for now we'll just leave it as this is probably my favorite Tolkien story that I've ever read. Before I continue on to the rest of my review though here, I'd just quickly like to say if you're liking what you're seeing from an Erudite adventure, we'd really appreciate it if you would like, comment, and subscribe. So this story is set in the First Age of Middle-earth. This is a time of beginnings, of wars, of the gods being present on Earth, or they're lower G gods. I like to call them greater and lesser angels, essentially. That's not exactly right. Even Tolkien referred to them as gods, but the way that my brain works, it's Erudite is God, and then the rest of these characters there's greater angels, meaning angels of more power and more authority, and then lesser angels, which are angels of not as much authority and power. But this story, though intricately linked to the rest of the Legendarium, is a self-contained standalone novel. It follows primarily Túrin, the son of Húrin, and Húrin is a very important character, which I'm not going to get into his story because though it does play a role in this book is primarily Túrin's story. So it follows Túrin throughout his journeys and his wanderings, from his home village in Dor-lómin to the halls of Thingol and Melian in Doriath, and on to his time as an outlaw, and then as a friend and really the chief counselor of Finrod Felagund in Nargothrond. After the destruction of Nargothrond, he goes to Brethiel in hopes of a new life. Obviously there's lots of events in between all these things, but those are kind of the major locations that he ends up spending time at. As an outlaw, he spends a lot of time on Amon Ruth, which the Bald Hill is what that is. Everywhere he goes, he brings death and destruction. Morgoth has cursed his family, only to later be cursed a second time by Glaurung, the father of dragons. Anyways, I find that I really love tragedies, and this is one that is just very tragic, very much so a tragedy. There's no happy endings to this story. Couldn't even spin this story as having a happy ending if you tried. Like, there's nothing positive about the way this story ends. But that sadness is so important to understanding Middle-earth, to understanding the elves and Aragorn in the Third Age several thousand years later. I forget exactly the timeline, but this is approximately actually this is close to the end of the First Age that this book takes place. There's maybe like 100 years or so left in the First Age after this book. And then the Second Age is about 3,000 years long, and then at the point where we are in the Third Age during Lord of the Rings, that's 3018 of the Third Age, so 3018. But yeah, so it's a good 6,000 years between the events of this book and Lord of the Rings, and still the events of this story are having effects on that world, on Middle-earth. This is the longest of what is known as the Great Tales. The other two are Beren and Luthien and the Fall of Gondolin, but there's so much detail in this story. You can learn a lot of the general outline of the story by reading the Silmarillion, but the amount of detail in the full tale is beyond what is given in the Silmarillion, far, far beyond. There's events like, it seems like you're just skim reading the highlights of Húrin's story, of Túrin's story when you're reading the Silmarillion. This book goes into detail so much on everything. It's really hard to talk about this book without spoilers, so I will primarily end the review here, but I want to mention that the audiobook, which is how I read it this time, is narrated by Sir Christopher Lee. Not only was Christopher Lee a fantastic actor with one of the greatest voices I've ever heard, but he's also the only cast member of the Lord of the Rings movies that met Tolkien in person. He was also a huge fan of the Lord of the Rings and reread it every year. So to have someone who understands this world in a way that so few others do, having him narrate this book, just adds another layer of epicness to it. Of course, Christopher Lee's voice, that deep baritone or bass even voice, where it just resonates, and the way that he reads the story, it's not the most flashy, most performative narration I've ever heard, but it lends itself to the epicness of this tale in a way that few other voices could. This book really is some of the best writing Tolkien ever did, and yes, he never finished it, and it was Christopher Tolkien who had to edit it and publish it, but the quality of this story is undeniable. It also happens to contain my favorite fantasy sword of all time and one of the greatest dragons of all literature. So that is my review for The Children of Húrin by J.R.R. Tolkien, edited by Christopher Tolkien. Thank you guys for watching an Erudite adventure. We post videos every Monday and Thursday, and have our social medias linked in the description down below. We'll see you guys again soon. Stay warm.